The northern wind howled across the fjord, carrying with it the promise of an early winter. Frost had already begun to gather on the wooden longhouses of Ravholm, a prosperous settlement nestled between towering mountains and the temperamental sea. Within the great hall, the flames of the hearth cast dancing shadows upon warriors and thralls alike as they gathered to hear Jarl Leif Nordsdottir announce his decision. Willa Nordsdottir stood rigid beside her father's ornate chair, her heart thundering like war drums against her ribs. At 20 winters, she was no longer a child, yet her father insisted on treating her as one. His thick, grey-streaked beard couldn't hide the satisfied smile as he raised his drinking horn. "The gods have blessed us with prosperity and victory," Jarl Leif proclaimed, his voice carrying to the rafters where ravens perched, watching the proceedings with glittering eyes. "And now they bless us with a powerful alliance. I have accepted Jarl Halbjorn's proposal. My daughter, Willa, will wed his son when the spring tides return." The hall erupted in cheers and the clanging of weapons against shields. All except Willa, whose face remained a careful mask of indifference even as rage coiled in her belly like a serpent. "Father," she whispered harshly, "you promised I would have a say in who I wed." Leif didn't look at her as he replied, "That was before Halbjorn offered 20 ships for our summer raids. His son is strong. He will give you strong sons. I've never even met him. You will. At your wedding." Leif raised his voice to address a burly warrior approaching their table. "Knut! Come, share mead with us. We were just discussing the raids you'll lead come spring." Knut Larsson bowed his head respectfully to the Jarl before his eyes flicked to Willa. At 25 winters, he was her father's most trusted warrior, having proven himself in battle countless times. His beard was shorter than most men's, framing a face weathered by sea spray and marked with a scar that cut across his right cheek, a memento from a Saxon blade. "The gods have blessed your decision, Jarl," he said, though Willa noticed his eyes didn't shine with the same conviction as his words. Later that night, as the celebration continued, Willa slipped away to the shore. The freezing spray from the fjord stung her face, but she welcomed the pain. It was a distraction from the future being carved for her without her consent. "The cold will claim your fingers if you remain here much longer," came a voice behind her. She didn't need to turn to know it was Knut. "Perhaps I should let it. A bride with no fingers cannot weave or cook. What use would I be to Halbjorn's son then?" Knut settled beside her on the rocky shore. "You speak as if your only value lies in your hands. Is that not what my father believes? That I am merely a vessel for alliances and heirs?" She picked up a stone and hurled it into the dark waters. "You lead raids. You decide your fate with your strength and courage. I am to be traded like a fine piece of amber. The Norns weave different paths for each of us, Willa. You have always known yours would be different from mine. The Norns can unravel their threads and start anew," she spat. Then, turning to him suddenly, her eyes gleaming with the reflection of Mani's light upon the water, she asked, "Take me with you." "What?" "On the raid. When you sail east in 3 days. Take me with you." Knut laughed, but it died quickly when he saw her expression. "That's madness. Your father would have my head." "Not if he doesn't know." Willa leaned closer, her breath forming clouds in the frigid air between them. "I can fight. You've seen me train when my father wasn't looking. Training in secret with wooden swords is not the same as facing men who want to kill you. Then I shall learn quickly, or die with a sword in my hand instead of a spindle. Willa, I would rather be welcomed to Valhalla as a shield maiden than live as a broodmare for a man I do not know." She gripped his arm, her fingers digging into the wool of his tunic. "Help me, Knut. Help me choose my own fate." The silence between them stretched, broken only by the rhythmic crash of waves against the shore. Finally, Knut sighed, his breath a white plume in the moonlight. 3 days, he said. "Cut your hair. Bind your chest. Meet me at the small dock before first light. If you are not there when the sun touches the horizon, I sail without you." Dawn had not yet broken when Willa crept from her father's hall. Beneath her cloak, she wore trousers stolen from a thrall, bound tightly at the waist. Her hair, once flowing to her hips, now barely reached her shoulders, hacked away in the dead of night with her eating knife. She had bound her chest so tightly that each breath was a labor, but the discomfort was a small price for freedom. Knut waited at the small dock as promised, his expression grim as she approached. "You came. Did you doubt me? I hoped you would reconsider. And I hoped you would have more faith in me." She pulled back her hood, revealing her shorn locks. "Will it convince the others?" Knut studied her face, his eyes lingering on the high cheekbones and full lips that no amount of dirt smudged across her skin could disguise. "Keep your hood up when possible. Speak little. Lower your voice when you must speak. You'll be Wilm, a farmer's son from the next valley, eager to earn glory and gold." The journey east was harder than Willa had anticipated. The longship pitched and rolled with each wave, and the men lived in close quarters that afforded little privacy. She relieved herself over the side of the ship only when others were distracted, and washed only at night, away from curious eyes. But she learned quickly how to row without complaining of blisters, how to read the stars for navigation, how to sharpen a blade until it could split a hair. Their first raid was on a small settlement on the eastern shores. Willa's heart hammered as they approached, the morning mist concealing their advance until they were nearly upon the shore. Knut had tried to convince her to stay with the ship, but she had refused. "If I am to be Wilm, then I must raid like Wilm," she had insisted. Now, as they charged up the beach toward the unsuspecting village, Willa found herself swept up in the tide of warriors. A man rushed at her, his face contorted with fear and rage. She raised her shield just as Knut had taught her, deflecting the blow, then thrust her sword forward. The sensation of blade meeting flesh was unlike anything she had prepared for. The man's eyes widened in surprise before he crumpled at her feet. She had no time to consider what she had done before another attacker was upon her. By the time the sun reached its zenith, the raid was over. The warriors returned to the ship laden with goods and slaves. Willa's arms trembled with exhaustion, and a cut above her eye sent blood trickling down her face, but she was alive. More than that, she had proven herself. "You fought well," Knut said as they secured their plunder. "For a first battle." "Only the first of many," she replied, unable to keep the fierce pride from her voice. Over the weeks that followed, they raided more settlements, venturing deeper into foreign territories. With each battle, Willa, now known to all as Wilm, grew more confident, more skilled. She learned to move within the shield wall, to anticipate an enemy's strike, to kill swiftly and without hesitation. The men began to respect her, or rather, the young warrior they believed her to be. She earned her place among them not through birth or alliance, but through blood and courage. And each night, as they camped on foreign shores or slept aboard their ship, she would sit apart, watching Knut from beneath lowered lashes, wondering if he saw her differently now. It was during their return journey, laden with treasures from distant lands, that their fortunes changed. A storm swept down upon them with such fury that even the most seasoned sailors among them grew pale. Waves as tall as the mast crashed over the ship, and lightning split the sky, illuminating the faces of men certain they were bound for Rant's underwater hall. "Secure the sail!" Knut bellowed over the howling wind. "Thor tests our strength this day." Willa scrambled to obey, her fingers numb with cold as she helped the men wrestle with the wind-whipped sail. A massive wave struck the ship broadside, sending her sliding across the deck. She clawed desperately for purchase, but found none. The next wave washed her overboard into the churning sea. The cold was a shock that stole her breath. Weighted down by her sodden clothing, she fought to stay afloat, calling out for help that couldn't be heard over the storm's fury. Then strong arms were around her, pulling her up, and Knut's face was before her, water streaming from his beard. "Hold on to me," he shouted, and she locked her arms around his neck as he swam back toward the ship, where hands reached down to haul them both aboard. They collapsed onto the deck, gasping for breath. Knut looked at her with a mixture of relief and fury. "You could have died." "So could you, coming after me," she retorted. "I wouldn't have had to if you'd stayed in your father's hall like a sensible woman." The words hung between them as the other warriors fell silent, staring. Willa's heart sank as she realized her secret was revealed. Her hand moved to her chest, where the binding had loosened in the water, revealing what could no longer be hidden. "A woman," one of the men exclaimed. "We've been raiding with a woman among us." "Not just any woman," Knut said, rising to his feet. "Willa Nordsdottir, daughter of Jarl Leif." The journey back to Ravholm was tense with unspoken accusations. The men avoided her, unsure whether to treat her as the shield maiden who had fought beside them or the Jarl's daughter they had unwittingly endangered. Only Knut seemed unchanged, though he watched her with a new wariness. As they approached the familiar shores, Willa felt dread pooling in her stomach. "My father will be furious." "Yes," Knut agreed. "With both of us. I'll tell him it was my idea. That I threatened you." Knut laughed without humor. "He won't believe that." "Then what will happen to you?" "That depends on how much your father values his best warrior against the dishonor of his daughter." The reception at Ravholm was as cold as Willa had feared. Word of their approach had reached the settlement before them, and Jarl Leif stood at the dock, his face a thundercloud. Behind him stood a man Willa didn't recognize, tall, broad-shouldered, with a thick red beard and cold eyes. "Halbjorn's son," Knut murmured. "Your intended." Willa squared her shoulders and stepped forward to face her father's wrath. "Father, silence!" Leif roared. "You shame me before our allies, before our gods. You, who should be preparing for your wedding, instead play at being a warrior." "I wasn't playing," Willa countered, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I fought. I killed. I bled. I earned my place among the warriors." "A woman's place is not among warriors." "The Valkyries would disagree," she said, drawing gasps from those gathered. "And so would Freya, who receives half the slain in her hall." Leif's face darkened further. "You dare invoke the gods to justify your disobedience?" He gestured at her shorn hair and men's clothing with disgust. "I dare to choose my own path, as the gods chose theirs." She took another step forward. "The men accepted me when they thought I was Wilm. They respected me for my skill with a blade, not my skill with a loom. And what of your betrothal? What of the alliance that now hangs by a thread because of your selfishness?" At this, Halbjorn's son stepped forward, his gaze raking over Willa with disdain. "I came to wed a maiden, not a shield-wielding harlot who dresses as a man." Before Willa could respond, Knut moved to stand beside her. "Watch your tongue when speaking of Jarl Leif's daughter," he warned, his hand resting meaningfully on his sword hilt. "Or what, oath-breaker? You who stole her away and allowed her to dishonor herself." "I didn't steal her," Knut replied, his voice dangerously calm. "She chose to come. And she proved herself in battle as well as any man among us. Better than some." The tension between the two men was palpable, like the air before lightning strikes. Jarl Leif, sensing the brewing violence, raised his hand for silence. "Enough. Knut Larsson, you have betrayed my trust. For that, you should forfeit your life." He paused, his gaze shifting to his daughter. "And you, Willa, you have defied me, broken your betrothal, and brought shame upon our family." "Father, but," he continued, cutting her off, "I have also heard tales of your raids. Tales that reached us before you did. Tales of a young warrior who fought with unusual grace and saved 3 men from death during the last battle." His expression softened marginally. "It seems the gods have different plans for you than I did." Relief washed over Willa, but it was short-lived. However, an alliance was promised. Honor demands it be fulfilled. Leif turned to Halbjorn's son. "Unless you wish to withdraw your suit." The man spat on the ground. "I do. Let someone else wed this aberration." Willa felt Knut tense beside her, and she placed a restraining hand on his arm. "Then we are in agreement," she said. "I wish no marriage with a man who cannot recognize strength in a woman." Leif sighed heavily. "So be it. The alliance is broken. We must prepare for the possibility of conflict with Halbjorn's people." He fixed Knut with a hard stare. You will lead our defense, since your actions have helped bring us to this point. Gladly, my Jarl, Knut replied with a bow. And you, Leif said to Willa, will continue your training properly, under the supervision of our shield maidens. If you insist on following this path, you will do it with honor. Willa couldn't suppress the smile that spread across her face. Yes, father. As the crowd dispersed, Willa turned to Knut. You risked everything for me. As did you for your freedom, he replied. It seems we are both willing to gamble with fate. And what does fate have in store for us now, do you think? Knut's eyes softened as he looked at her. That, he said, depends on what you want it to be. The months that followed were filled with rigorous training and preparation for the expected conflict with Hallbjorn's people. Willa trained with the shield maidens, women who had chosen the path of the warrior over that of the wife and mother. They were few in number but fierce in skill, and they welcomed her among their ranks with a mix of skepticism and respect. You fought well enough to fool the men, said Astrid, the eldest among them, but men are easily fooled. Now you will learn to fight like a true shield maiden. And learn she did. Her muscles hardened, her reflexes sharpened, and her understanding of battle strategy deepened under their tutelage. No longer did she need to hide her gender or pretend to be someone else. She was Willa Nordsdottir, shield maiden of Ravholm, and she wore the title with pride. Throughout this time, Knut remained a constant presence. He had been restored to his position as her father's trusted warrior, though the relationship between the two men remained strained. When not leading raids or patrols, he would often join Willa's training sessions, offering insights from his own experiences. Your shield is too low, he would say, or watch your footing on uneven ground. Each criticism was delivered with a smile that made Willa's heart beat faster than any exertion. Their friendship deepened into something more, though neither spoke of it openly. There were moments, a lingering touch as he adjusted her grip on a sword, a shared laugh over mead in the great hall, a glance that held too long to be merely friendly, that hinted at feelings beyond camaraderie. It was during the harvest celebration, as the settlement prepared for the coming winter, that word finally came of Hallbjorn's plans. A scout returned breathless to the great hall, interrupting the feasting with dire news. Jarl Leif. Hallbjorn's ships have been spotted. At least 15, approaching from the south. They'll be here by midday tomorrow. The hall erupted in a flurry of activity as warriors reached for weapons and thralls scurried to secure provisions. Leif raised his hand for silence. We knew this day would come, he said, his voice steady. Our walls are strong, our warriors prepared. We will meet them with steel and courage. As the assembly broke up to make preparations, Willa sought out Knut. She found him by the armory, inspecting the edge of his battle axe. It's happening, then, she said. He nodded without looking up. Hallbjorn was never one to forget a slight. Your rejection of his son wounded his pride as much as it threatened his ambitions. My rejection? His son was the one who withdrew his suit. After you had already run away and returned a warrior. Now Knut did look at her, his eyes serious. I don't regret helping you, Willa. But I regret the blood that will be shed because of it. The blood is on Hallbjorn's hands, not yours, she insisted. And I will stand with you tomorrow to defend our home. Knut's expression softened. I know you will. And there is no one I would rather have at my side in battle. He hesitated, then added, but first, there is something I must ask your father. Dawn broke clear and cold over Ravholm. The settlement was a hive of activity as defenders took their positions along the wooden palisade and archers climbed to their platforms. Willa stood with the shield maidens at the eastern gate, her hair, now grown to just below her ears, braided tightly against her head. She wore leather armor over a padded tunic, with iron rings sewn onto the shoulders and chest for added protection. Nervous? Asked Astrid, taking her place beside her. Only a fool feels no fear before battle, Willa replied, repeating one of the older woman's frequent lessons. Good. Fear keeps you alive. Astrid squinted at the horizon. Though I notice it's not the approaching enemy that has you fidgeting. Your eyes keep straying to a certain warrior by your father's side. Willa felt heat rise to her cheeks. I don't know what you mean. Of course not, Astrid said with a knowing smile. Just as I don't know what Knut Larsson discussed with your father in private last night. Before Willa could demand an explanation, a horn sounded from the southern watchtower. Halbjorn's forces had been spotted. The battle was fierce and chaotic. Halbjorn's warriors crashed against Ravholm's defenses like waves against a rocky shore. Arrows flew overhead, shields splintered, and the air filled with the clash of metal and the cries of the wounded. Willa fought alongside her shield sisters, their formation a deadly dance of coordinated strikes and defensive maneuvers. She lost track of time, aware only of the next opponent, the next threat. Blood, both enemy and friend, stained the ground beneath her feet. It was near midday when the eastern gate finally gave way under the relentless assault. Warriors poured through the breach, and the fighting intensified to a desperate struggle within the settlement itself. In the melee, Willa became separated from her shield sisters. She found herself backed against the wall of a storehouse, facing 3 of Halbjorn's men alone. She raised her shield, knowing it wouldn't be enough but determined to make them pay dearly for her life. The first man charged, and she deflected his blow, countering with a strike that caught him in the side. But before she could recover, the second was upon her. His sword crashed against her shield with such force that she staggered backward. The third circled around, looking for an opening. Then a familiar battle cry rang out, and Knut was there, his axe cleaving through the air to bury itself in the second attacker's chest. Together, they dispatched the remaining warrior, their movements so perfectly synchronized that it seemed they had fought side by side all their lives. Are you hurt? Knut demanded, his eye scanning her for injuries. Nothing serious, she assured him, though her left arm throbbed where a blade had sliced through her armor. Where is my father? Leading the defense at the main hall. Come, we must join him. They fought their way through the settlement, gathering allies as they went. The tide of battle seemed to be turning in their favor, with Halbjorn's forces becoming more disorganized as they pressed deeper into unfamiliar territory. At the main hall, they found Jarl Leif directing the defense, his sword bloody but his spirit undiminished. Knut! Willa! The gods favor us today. Halbjorn's men begin to falter. Where is Halbjorn himself? Knut asked, scanning the battlefield. I haven't seen him, Leif admitted. Perhaps he remained with the ships. A cry went up from the defenders as a fresh wave of attackers approached the hall. Among them was a towering figure with a distinctive helm adorned with raven wings. Halbjorn, Willa breathed. The battle renewed with savage intensity. Halbjorn carved a path toward Leif, his warriors forming a wedge around him. Knut and Willa moved to intercept, but were caught in the press of bodies. Willa fought desperately to reach her father, but for every enemy she struck down, another took his place. She caught glimpses of the confrontation, Leif standing his ground, Halbjorn advancing with murderous intent, their blades meeting in a shower of sparks. Then she saw her father stumble, his foot slipping in a pool of blood. Halbjorn raised his sword for the killing blow. Father! Willa screamed, redoubling her efforts to break through. But she was too far away, too late. A blur of motion intercepted Halbjorn's strike. Knut had thrown himself between the chieftains, his shield raised to catch the descending blade. The force of the blow drove him to one knee, but he held, giving Leif time to regain his footing. Halbjorn roared with fury and struck again, this time aiming for Knut. The younger warrior parried, then counterattacked with a swift upward thrust that caught Halbjorn beneath the arm, where his armor was weakest. The chieftain staggered but didn't fall. He swung wildly, his blade slicing across Knut's thigh. Blood gushed from the wound, and Knut faltered. Willa finally broke through the line of enemies, her sword a silver arc as she charged toward Halbjorn. The chieftain turned to meet her, his face twisting with recognition and disdain. The shield maiden who would be a bride, he sneered. Come to die with your lover. Come to send you to hell, she retorted, and attacked. Their duel was swift and brutal. Halbjorn had the advantage of size and strength, but Willa was quicker, more agile. She ducked under his swings, struck at his exposed sides, wore him down with a relentless series of feints and jabs. Finally, seeing an opening, she feigned a high strike, then dropped to one knee as he moved to block, driving her sword upward into his groin. Hallbjorn's eyes widened in shock and pain. He tried to speak, but only blood bubbled from his lips before he collapsed. The sight of their leader falling broke the resolve of Hallbjorn's remaining warriors. They retreated in disarray, pursued by Ravholm's defenders all the way back to their ships. Willa didn't join the pursuit. She rushed to where Knut lay, his face pale from blood loss. Her father was already there, pressing a cloth against the wound on Knut's thigh. "How bad is it?" she asked, kneeling beside them. "Deep, but clean," Leif replied. "He'll live, with proper care." Knut's eyes fluttered open. "Did we win?" "Yes," Willa said, taking his hand. "Hallbjorn is dead. His men flee." "Good." He tried to sit up, then winced in pain. "I need to tell you something, Willa. Save your strength. You can tell me after the healers have seen to your wound." "No. It can't wait." He glanced at Leif, who nodded and moved away to give them privacy. "Last night, I asked your father for your hand." Willa's heart stuttered in her chest. "You what?" "I asked to wed you. If you'll have me." Despite his weakness, a smile played at the corners of his mouth. "He said the decision was yours to make. That he'd learned not to choose your path for you." Tears blurred Willa's vision. "And what path do you see for us, Knut Larsson?" "One where we fight side by side, in battle and in life. Where our children learn both the sword and the loom, regardless of whether they are sons or daughters." His grip on her hand tightened. "Where I love you for your strength and courage, not despite it." Willa leaned down and pressed her lips to his, tasting blood and salt and something uniquely Knut. "Yes," she whispered against his mouth. "Yes, I will wed you." The wedding took place at the winter solstice, when darkness held the land in its grip the longest, making the need for light and celebration all the more vital. Ravholm had recovered from the battle, its defenses rebuilt stronger than before. Knut's wound had healed, leaving him with a slight limp that did nothing to diminish his prowess as a warrior. In the great hall, decorated with evergreen boughs and lit by hundreds of candles, Willa stood before the assembled settlement in a gown of deep blue, a sword belt at her waist. Her hair had grown enough that it could be braided elaborately, with silver threads woven through it that caught the light when she moved. Knut awaited her at the high table, dressed in his finest tunic, his beard neatly trimmed and his eyes never leaving her as she approached. Between them stood the Godi, the priest who would perform the ceremony. "Who gives this woman in marriage?" the Godi asked. Leif stepped forward, his face solemn but his eyes bright with emotion. "I, Jarl Leif Nordsdottir, give my daughter, Willa, Shield Maiden of Ravholm, to this man." The exchange of swords was unusual. Traditionally, the groom presented his ancestral weapon to his bride for safekeeping, to be given to their future son. But as Knut handed his sword to Willa, she surprised the assembly by presenting him with her own in return. "As you trust me with your legacy," she said, her voice clear in the hushed hall, "so I trust you with mine. May our children, be they sons or daughters, inherit both our strengths." Knut accepted her sword with reverence. "May they also inherit your courage and your heart," he replied. The feast that followed lasted well into the night, with tales of battle and bravery shared alongside cups of mead and plates of roasted meat. The skald composed a new verse celebrating the Shield Maiden who had disguised herself as a man and won not only every battle but also the heart of the settlement's greatest warrior. As the celebration continued around them, Knut led Willa outside into the crisp winter night. Above them, the stars glittered like ice crystals, and the aurora danced across the northern sky in ribbons of green and gold. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked, his arm around her waist. "Cutting your hair, binding your chest, choosing the path of a warrior." Willa leaned into his embrace, her eyes on the heavens. "No. Had I remained as my father wished, I would never have known what I was capable of. I would never have found my true self." She turned to face him, reaching up to trace the scar on his cheek. And I would never have found you, not truly. We would have been Jarl and warrior, nothing more. And now we are husband and wife, warrior and shield maiden. He smiled down at her. The Skalds will sing of us for generations to come. Let them sing, Willa said, rising on her toes to kiss him. But let us live first, our saga written in our own blood and sweat and joy. Above them, the Valkyries watched unseen, pleased with the shield maiden who had forged her own destiny and the warrior who had loved her for her strength. In the halls of Valhalla, the Einherjar raised their horns in salute to a tale worthy of the gods themselves. And in Ravholm, under the dancing lights of the northern sky, Willa and Knut began to write the next chapter of their saga, together.